Okay, so Ecclesiastes 7 to 12. But right now we'll focus on chapter 7 actually. So before we start, again, I'm going to go over some of your comments, not everyone. So we have a little more time to lecture. Yeah, one of you mentioned this quote that I was looking for. This is in, just wanted you to just put this in the back of your mind in chapter 7 when he's, or is it chapter 7 or 11? Yeah, we'll talk about 11 later today, but this is from Olivera. Olivera, where are you here? Is Olivera here? Yes. Where do you find, yes, where is this quote? We do not know the path of the wind or the workings of the womb. You know, the quote you put in your reading assignment, or anybody else who knows where this is.
Let me check.
11.
I think I put I quote, no?
Yeah, that's a quote. I'm trying to figure out where you found that quote, and I think it's in 11, but I can't find it right now. Who knows where this is? For we do not know the path of the wind or the workings of the womb. Gosh, so annoying.
Yeah, 11.
11 what?
Around verse 5 for me.
Okay.
Or chapter,
Yeah. Oh my God. This translation, okay, me is verse 4. Wow, where's the wind here? I don't have wind in, okay, let me get the other Bible.
Mine says, as you do not know the path of the wind or how the body is formed in a mother's womb, so you cannot understand the work of God.
Yeah, that's what I have in my mind, but the translation I have, so 11:5. As you do not know the way of the spirit that comes to the bones, they connect it. Okay, what do you have? Can you say it again, Bernard?
Where'd it go? As you do not know the path of the wind or how the body is formed in a mother's womb, so you cannot understand the work of God, the maker of all things.
Interesting. Okay, let me check if I can figure out the Hebrew, which is a little tricky for me. So this is verse 5. I'll have to study this a little longer, but yeah, we'll talk about this anyways. But I wanted to just remember the notion of you do not know the path of the wind, because when we study the book of John next week, right, Jesus is going to quote from this passage when he talks to the Pharisee in John chapter 3, where he says, you do not know where the wind goes. So I just thought we should keep that in the back of our minds. So thank you, Olivera, for reminding me. So a few of you struggled with the misogynistic statement, one man have I found, or one upright man I have found in many, but not one woman, right? I think a bunch of you were struggling with this. So actually, let's go there briefly. I'm not gonna, go too deep into that, but yes, there is a way around that, obviously. Where is this again? Today it's just, I just looked at this and now I do not know where it is anymore. So whoever was
7:28.
What?
Chapter 7, verse 28.
Thank you guys helping me. Okay, chapter 7, verse 20. I need to get glasses or something that will magnify my Bible. So you said 7:28? Yes, okay. So watch the context, right? Starting at verse 23. He is talking from verse 23 up until and then he abruptly talks about the woman, right? But from 23 to 26, he's talking about how he cannot find wisdom, right? And then all of a sudden, 26, now I find woman more bitter than death. So it's random, right? And then he continues, right, with this notion of that her hands are fetters, her heart is snares, etc. And then he says, I have found only one human being, and the translation is better. I have found only one human being in 1,000 and the one I found among so many was never a woman, right? So he is talking here in the context of not being able to find wisdom and getting entangled in his quest for wisdom. And so the woman, and then randomly he's talking about the woman. It's not that all of a sudden he remembers all the horrible women in his life, is that here woman becomes, I think Bernard, you anticipated that, woman is a metaphor for wisdom. Right, and in the ancient Near East, actually, she is literally a metaphor for wisdom. So if you look in the book of Proverbs, wisdom is personified by a woman. And this is the same author. This is Solomon, right? So we can read this as him basically saying, when he talks about woman, he's talking about Lady Wisdom, right? Who ensnares him rather than liberates him, right? He's so entangled in his quest for wisdom that he then kind of breaks into this metaphor, and one woman I cannot find and she ensnares me, etc. So this is here talking about wisdom as being a source of ensnarement rather than liberation. Are you following this? Does this make sense to you guys? Who was it who brought up the question? I think it was Bernard and also Butterfield. Butterfield, are you better? Yeah. Okay. Edmonds, go ahead.
So I can accept that in 26, if we just take the woman as knowledge. But if we go over to 28, where he says, I found one upright man among 1,000, but not one upright woman among them all, I still don't see how that's answered necessarily by this, view of woman as wisdom.
Yeah, so it follows, of course, this notion of the woman as being an entrapment, meaning, following from the way he's hating his quest for wisdom above it, how she eludes him, she's elusive, who can discover her, and then one. But then, remember, in verse 26, doesn't say I found one man. It says I found one human being. So if it was like I found one man, in the Hebrew, man is ish and woman is isha. Here you don't have the word ish, you have the word adam, which is human being in general. So he's not saying, oh yeah, the man is okay, but the woman is, a source of ensnarement, like the Greeks would have interpreted this passage, right? But he's just saying, so it is kind of obscure, that line, I found only one human, but what the hell does he mean by saying, right? So there are some obscure moments, but the general context of this passage, commentators believe that this whole thing on the woman is referring to his ensnarement by his quest for wisdom. So the passage is unclear, but he's for sure not saying, oh yeah, man over here is righteous and woman, right? It's a human being here, Adam, anybody, male or female, right? So he's not contrasting male and female. Does that help a little bit? But I mean, it's still an obscure passage. Yes, that particular line is like, okay, what? But we know in the context that he's complaining about lady wisdom rather than being complaining about woman in general, right? Yeah, I find it hard to believe that he would be misogynistic in general, given, of course, his participation in goddess worship, the way he wrote the Song of Songs, right? So if you know the author in general, you know that he is not a misogynistic person. So we have to interpret this different, right? No, not in this. So Williams is asking if it was more about lust as obsession. Not in this context, right? Because he just finished talking about how he's trapped by wisdom, and then he goes and narrows it down to woman. And we know that woman in the ancient Near East is the personification of wisdom. So this is not about male-female relationship. This is him and seeking wisdom. Does that make sense, Williams?
Yeah, but I just meant like lust in terms of like as a goal, like wisdom, like attaining wisdom, but it's the same thing, but you're trying to attain lust as a competing goal. That's what.
I don't see what you're saying exactly.
So that like lust and wisdom are two goals, and he's in like in his mind he's competing for both of them.
Where do you see lust? I'm not seeing where you're seeing that.
No, because the way you describe it is like the man and woman situation. It sounds like it's a dark lust that he's talking about.
Yeah,
like,
dark lust, but not for women. It's a dark lust for wisdom, right?
Okay.
This is not about him lusting after a woman, at least based on the context, right? I'm sure he lusted after many women, but in this context, right, this is, we're in the context of the getting entangled into wisdom, and therefore the woman here is the personification of wisdom. So that one I'm actually pretty sure about. Like, sometimes I hesitate with Solomon, but this one I'm actually pretty sure that this is the right way to read that passage. Then there was, yes, a bunch of you noticed how he is saying, this passage we're going to actually study today. Don't be too wise, don't be too wicked, right? And he's kind of like in this wishy-washy, kind of middle way path. And some of you are like, well, that's nice. Don't be too wise, don't be too wicked. So how should we be? What's the path, right? And actually, we're going to study this path today, and we're going to study it together because it's intriguing. It's an intriguing path. I myself am struggling also. A lot of commentators, including me, struggling with this passage. So we'll see if we can come up with new insights. But certainly there is a path that is being traced out, and it's the path called the path of the fear of God, right? So we have to explore this concept today. The fear of God, what does it mean? We will do so with some parallel passages, right? But I'm very intrigued about what is this third path, right? And we'll study it together, actually. And just to anticipate for Perso, right? Perso is still struggling with the notion of surrender, right? To a kind of, which we've been, where are you, Perso? Oh, she's somewhere. Okay, right. So hopefully she's hearing me. Right. So this idea of why should I surrender to, this kind of invisible, right? We were talking about how life is gift, right? And when we let go, we receive, right? We are able to receive better the gifts of life. And she's like, why should I surrender, right? So today we're going to look at that, right? Why should we surrender to life? Why should we trust life, right? So we're going to look at that a little bit. Okay, before we get started, does anyone have any burning issue you want to bring up just to get it off your chest?
Like, I was going to ask, it sounds like a self-help book. The way to, no, because remember, didn't you see that I wrote that as
I did.
And I was like, because it sounds like a self-help book when you think about it. The way, no, like, listen, like any of the self-help people, like Steve Colby, talk like this. Like you have to let go of all your impositions. You have to let go and
I see.
And that's why, because that's why I was asking, was it designed to sound that way, or was it?
Actually, it's me who's making it sound like a self-help book. It's not written in that style, right? I think you're reading. I think my interpretation when I'm saying we need to learn to surrender, he's not saying that, right? He's just saying everything is given, and he drops us there, right? So I'm the one, I think, who is turning this book into a self-help book. I take full responsibility. I don't think Ecclesiastes would be happy with that diagnosis, though. Right? I think he's wanting to disturb more than help, right? I'm the one who, however, for the benefit of this classroom, right, I'm trying to go beyond the disturbance, and I'm interpreting it in a self-help manner. Yes, I'm guilty of that. Guilty as charged, but I don't think Ecclesiastes, that was his purpose. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying, I don't think it's you. I just think it's structured in that way to bring people out of their comfort zone. That's the only reason. That's it. Sorry. Oh,
in that sense. Okay, because I always think of self-help as finding solutions and fixing our problems, right? So if you're looking at it more like, getting out of the comfort zone. Yeah. So actually, by the way, just to add to what you're saying, I think it's interesting. There's a whole branch of psychology called existential counseling. And it's based on philosophical texts, right? It's based on the writings of Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, Marcel. And I think there's a whole, how shall I put it, field of possibilities, right? Of teaching people about life through these existentialist texts, of which Ecclesiastes is a part. We are seeing that, right? So a different way to do psychology than Freud and Jung. You can have Ecclesiastes, Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, and you can also bring people places with those texts, right? So this is called existential counseling. And it's actually a very brand new field, right? Where they're basing their therapy on philosophical texts rather than on psychoanalytic texts, right? So just thought you might find that interesting. I see Olivera and Perso.
So I'm going to ask if you are going to go a little bit over the the conclusion, because he says a lot of stuff and the conclusion doesn't make a little sense. You mentioned that you want to speak about like the fear of God, but was just curious how he arrived at the conclusion.
Yes, the conclusion is terrible, isn't it? Sorry, my computer is moving around. I'll tell you why, because my camera is too heavy for my computer. So it's just balancing my computer. I know Rudolph is annoyed each time my screen moves like this. So yes, we'll definitely do chapter 12 briefly, because it sounds like a complete anticlimax, right? Here we were, wandering around in the unknown, and all of a sudden he's like, yeah, fear God and keep his commandments. That is the whole duty of man. Doesn't sound like him, right? So we have to talk about this, definitely. Perso, go ahead.
Well, like, I just kind of had a problem because maybe I was reaching. I didn't really like explicitly write this in my response, but I kept trying to connect it to the other readings we're reading. And it's like, I felt like I kept trying to figure out what surrender meant, like you mentioned, but like in terms of the long plan. What is God talking about when it comes to sin, life, and death now? Is it something different, or is it the same as what we've been discussing?
Yeah.
Does that change?
Today we'll look more deeply into this notion of surrender, which is actually the meaning of the fear of God. So we're going to look at that more precisely. Hopefully you'll get some answers. But yeah, is that what you're asking, that, right? About what surrender actually means?
But it's not only about surrender, it's about like, what is sin? Like, does that change? It feels like it's changed from Genesis to Ecclesiastes, in my opinion.
Do you see sin here in the book of Ecclesiastes?
No, but I feel like it's kind of like, how do I explain it? It's like implied.
Where?
He doesn't explicitly, okay, hold on, wait, I have to find it now. Oh my God.
Find it, because I'm thinking this is not his main concern.
I mean, maybe it's not his main concern, but I kept thinking about it, and like I was just like, okay, in terms of Genesis, in terms of what we read in terms of that, like, how does that connect to this? Yeah. Like, what is the overarching goal? Like, does God in this chapter, because even though God's not explicitly like there, like speaking, it's through Solomon, like, okay, what does he think about this? I don't really feel like God's presence in this chapter at all. Like, and that's what really threw me off. Like, life and death, what are we getting at with this one? What is the point? What is the point of surrender? Why would I surrender to Solomon? Like, hello.
Okay, good. So yeah, so I think the discussion on the fear of God will be, I think, what you're looking for, a little more precision into the nature of this surrender. Okay, so let's go there together. First, we have a little discussion on the good. So I want to briefly go over that. It's my last page, 30, 31. Okay, so go with me to the beginning of 7. We're just going to start there, and then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of the fear of God. But for now, we're just going to, this beginning of chapter 7 is a review of what we've done so far. So we won't do too fast. So it's interesting, right? Chapter 7 actually doesn't start, right? The way they distinguish the chapters is weird, because actually it begins a little earlier. Remember, the sections in this book are divided by Havel, right? So anytime you have that conclusive statement, everything is Havel, this too is Havel, that marks the end of a section. So chapter 6, verse 9, here you have, right, at the end, this too is futility and pursuit of the wind, right? Havel. That's the actual word. Actually, Havel and pursuit of the wind. So here, this marks the end of that section that we did yesterday. Did we? We didn't do 6, but it marks the end of that section. And so then starts a new section in chapter 6, verse 10. And here we have the question in verse 12, who can possibly know what is good for a man to do in his life? Okay. The word in the Hebrew, whatever translation you have, the word in the Hebrew is tov, right? I hope you notice that in this book we have a dance, right, between Havel and tov, right? Havel meaning, of course, the ungraspable. I'm just going to translate it like that. And tov, right, meaning the good. So we have, right, it's interesting. I hope you're seeing these two voices. Last time we talked about under the sun and under the heavens, right? Here now we have when he talks about the good, and then when he talks about Havel, there's a dance here between the good and Havel, which is also very interesting. So he asked this question, right? What is the good? And then in chapter 7, he will answer it, right? So now what's interesting is that the good, right, which used to be the obvious attribute of the creation, right? What we saw in Genesis 1, right? Everything was good. Now we're going to see that the good is found in strange places, right? And so let's look at that a little bit. So again, the translations are not so good because my translation says, chapter 7, verse 2, it is better, right? This whole session, right, where it's going, it is better, it is better, it is better. Actually, the word is good, 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 tov. Okay, everybody got that? That in chapter 7, the beginning, each time it says it is better to, it is better to, it is better to. Actually, the word in the Hebrew is tov, lalechet, tov. Good to go da 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 da. Good to da 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 da. Good. Okay, so here he's answering the question in chapter 6, verse 12. Okay, let me make sure I write this in the chat, right? So the question here, chapter 6, verse 12 is, what is good? And here in chapter 7, this is the answer, right? Good, da da da, good, da da da, etc. Right? And the word, of course, is tov each time, right? Okay, so let's just ponder a little bit this passage. This is kind of going back to what we were talking about, that good is not obviously good sometimes, right? Sometimes it's a painful moment, which Solomon says, well, this too is good, right? Sometimes pleasurable moments. So let's look a little bit briefly here at some of these, right? So first of all, we have, I'm going to skip around. Good is the day of death, right? Versus the day of birth. So let's talk a little bit about this. Why does he call the day of death good? What is good about the day of death? Can anyone tell me? Christodoulou, go ahead.
I don't know if I can tell you, but it is interesting to me that like he seems to change what he's saying later, like here, because he's saying the day of death is better, but the theme of the whole enterprise was that like having possibilities in life is better. Like even if things are bad, the future is still better than no future. So I don't understand where
the
this
word
comes
better is not used, just good. So it's okay for him to say good is the future, possibilities of life, good is death. So he's saying both, right? And he's perfectly cool with that. Right? So, because again, remember, life is made up of contradictions and both are good, right? That's what we studied last time, that God has made everything beautiful in its time, right? So the birth with the possibilities of life is good, but here he's emphasizing death too is good. Right? So it's not better, right? It's just, he's just saying it's good too, also good, maybe we could say, right? So let's see, there's another hand. Who is it? Rudolph and Giannakopoulos, go ahead.
Well, you said many things I wanted to allude to, but also the death ends anyone's struggle trying to figure out the meaning of life. So there is a final answer to all your questions. In that sense, death can be very positive.
Okay, good, right? I mean, this is a tendency we have to say death is bad, right? But somebody like Solomon, and also I'm looking, just thinking in philosophy, also somebody like Gabriel Marcel or so, see death not so much as something bad as a mystery. Death is a mystery. We don't know what's going to happen. It could be amazing. Who knows, right? It could be dreadful too. Who knows, right? But there is what he is saying. He's not saying this specifically, but in general, right? There's the sense that these things that we call bad might not necessarily be bad because life is mysterious and we don't understand everything. And especially death, we know nothing about it. So why are we going around saying it's bad when we know nothing about it? Has anyone come back from death and told us it is bad? No, right? So we don't know. So Ecclesiastes is saying we don't know, and in his general philosophy that all of life is gift, right? Then perhaps death too is a gift, right? And in the sense that you're saying, Rudolph, maybe in death, this is when we finally can see, understand, not get entangled in the wisdom, right? So perhaps, good. Giannakopoulos, go ahead.
And maybe he's saying that the day of your death is more important than the day of your birth. Like in my church, we say that the most important day of your life is the day that you die, because that single day can, depending on what you do that day, can either make you go to heaven or hell.
Uh-oh.
So You know, like I know I said this yesterday, but when Christ was crucified on the cross, the last day, that was his last day of death, and so it was the same for the robbers, right?
Okay, very
And
nice.
one robber chose to have a good death, and the other one chose to have a bad death.
Absolutely, right? Death, you can have an amazing death. You can, putting away the idea of hell or heaven, which are not in our text, right? There is really a way to die well, right? And a lot of us don't know how to die well, perhaps because we did not live well, right? So yes, there is some beauty here that we are missing to the day of our death. And we are not really learning to die gracefully and to see the beauty in that moment, right? But some of us who've been with loved ones towards the end of their lives know how amazingly beautiful those moments can be, right? So there is something there, right, that we have called bad. And Solomon is saying, why? How you know, right? This moment too can be beautiful and good, right? So very nice. Okay, let's look at the next one. Good is sorrow rather than laughter. Okay, this one we know already. Let's review. What does it mean that good is sorrow? It doesn't feel like sorrow is good. We say, I'm having a hard time, I'm having a bad time, I'm having a bad day. And here he's saying good is sorrow. Why is sorrow good? Even in addition to laughter, right? Olivera, go ahead.
Would it be connected to what we said yesterday on your good moments? You are not learning so much and you're not developing so much, and then you're like at the moments that you are like going to hardship is opportunity to grow. So I think this is what he would be referring to.
Right, exactly. Right, this is what I'm saying. This passage is a review, right, of what we did yesterday, right? The sorrow is opportunity to grow, to develop compassion, to develop humility, right? And in that sense, there is a beauty to sorrow, right, that is not found in laughter, right? So there's a specific goodness to sorrow that laughter will never have, right, in that sense. Rudolph, go ahead.
Absolutely. And in the arc of the conversation, that everything we do, everything we strive for, everything we question is attached to some sort of sorrow. It is the good that we're seeking. It is the question of how we can achieve that good. It is what motivates us to go on and seek for more and different. And therein lies sorrow. So it's this dichotomy again of, there is nothing you can do. It is just so.
Yeah, very good. And so Ecclesiastes says it is just so, but we can receive it with joy, right? So there is still, right, like the Stoics, he's very close to the Stoics. We cannot change life, but we can change our response. And through our response, life can become, instead of becoming our enemy, life can become our friend, right? Depending on how the stance, right, that we adopt. So very, very Stoic here. This is such a great test question that has just been developing throughout the whole class. There's a Stoicism and Ecclesiastes, right? So he goes on the list always with things that we perceive as bad, and he's telling us, no, here too, the good, right? Again, trying to shift our perspective, trying to get us to leave behind this, like Williams called in the beginning, the binary of good and evil. He's saying, no, the good is everywhere. In this sense, it's interesting. In this sense, he's very close to the creation story, right? I know we've been saying he's, battering the creation story, or butchering it. Actually, that was the goal of the creation story, was to say everything is good, right? And in a way, he's saying that. He's saying everything. Even though there has been what theologians call a fall, right, or sin or whatever, he's saying no, the creation is still gorgeous and it is still good. Everything is still good, right? So he's making an incredibly revolutionary statement here that actually creation is still all good, even in its state, even in its crooked state. We can still receive all of life as being good, right? So this is interesting theology or cosmology, right? Because theologians say, in general, when God created the universe, it was good, and then people sinned, and now there's bad, right? Solomon is saying, no, who told you? Who told you there was a change? right, in the ontological makeup of the universe. Basically, he's saying the idea that everything now that there is bad that has entered the world is a human construct. Life is still altogether completely good, right? In that sense, that's very challenging statement here, right? So continuing on verse 15, I think. 13, 15, let's see. 13. Yes. Consider God's doing. Who can straighten what he has twisted? So in a time of good fortune, enjoy the good fortune, and in a time of misfortune, reflect, right? So again, this idea that both have a specific treasure. The good fortune, happiness comes, or pleasure comes, enjoy. Pain comes, reflect, right? So okay, so this was easy. We've done this already. We're kind of used to seeing this perspective from the few texts we have done so far, but now we will enter into a very difficult passage, which has to do with moral good and evil, right? So far we've talked of pain and pleasure, and I think everyone is unanimous. All religions agree, right? There is good hidden in pain. I think most religions even emphasize you need to feel pain, right? So this is something that there is a consensus in the religious world, but now we are going to enter a very tricky area where Solomon is going to look very heretical. So are you guys ready? We're entering the notion of moral good, right? So it's going to be tricky, and this is a passage that I'm struggling with. So all you guys already put your hand on the screen if you're with me, if you're attentive, intelligent, and so forth, awake. Okay, so and I'm gonna need you, right? Because scholars are still struggling with this passage. I am still myself trying to find my way through because it's a kind of convoluted passage, but I think it'll be interesting to hear what you guys have to say. So watch this. I am in chapter 7, verse, I'm going to start in verse 50. Everybody with me? 7:15. Put your hand in the screen if you're there. Okay. All right. So he says this. In my own brief span of time, I have seen both these things. Sometimes a good man perishes in spite of his goodness. Sometimes a wicked one endures in spite of his wickedness. Okay, so that we know. He's talked about this for a while. Now, here's the line I want you to focus on. So don't overdo goodness, and don't act the wise man to excess, or you may be dumbfounded. And then he continues, same idea. Don't overdo wickedness, and don't be a fool, or you may die before your time. Okay, so he's saying don't be too wise, but don't be too foolish either. Okay, sounds like, now here's the part. So that part I can relate to because he's talking about the middle way. Don't be too much of this. This is very Greek again, right? To come back to the Greeks. Everybody knows, right, that the virtue in Aristotle is doing something without excess, right? So if you eat too much, this is not virtuous. If you eat too little, neither, right? It's eating just right. That is virtue, right? So virtue in the Greek landscape is balance, the middle way. So here sounds like sounding very Greek, right? So fine. Now here's the part that baffles me. So maybe you can help me. So I'm on verse, where am I? 18. It is best that you grasp the one without letting go of the other, for the one who fears God, bad translation I have, will do his duty. Actually, the one who fears God will escape them all. It's weird. Okay, let me say it again. Let's write it down, and we're going to analyze this passage together. So he says this. I'm going to write it down. Where is it? What did I say? Yes. It is best. I'm going to put it in the chat so we all have it. It is best to grasp the one without letting go of the other. And then he continues, for the one who fears God, and the actual translation should be, will escape them all. Okay, so let's do this. First of all, what is he grasping without letting go? Is it wisdom? Obviously, right? It seems like it is good to grasp onto wisdom without letting go of foolishness. Somebody help me. What is he saying when he's saying you need to hold? So it's not the middle way anymore, right? Middle way says you need balance, whatever. Here he's saying, hold on to wisdom. Don't let go of wickedness, right? Hold on, right? This is what he just said, right? He said the difference between a goodness, wisdom, and then wickedness and foolishness. So he's saying here, I hope you're getting this, right? He's saying two things. Hold on to goodness, but don't let go of wickedness. Hold on to wisdom, but don't let go of foolishness. Okay, what does this mean? What do you think? What does it mean? What kind of advice is this, that we have to hold on to goodness, but keep a little bit of wickedness, right, in the trunk? And then hold on to wisdom, but keep a little bit of foolishness. What kind of advice is this? Does anyone have any idea? What is he saying here? Okay, let's start with Bernard and then Olivera.
Sorry. I guess I was thinking it would mean that don't be so wise that you don't allow yourself to indulge or live life to a certain extent, and don't be so foolish that you are living kind of surface level or aren't seeking for deeper meaning as well, kind of just to have a balance of the two.
So you would allow for us to be a little bit wicked?
Just a little bit. Yes, just a tiny bit.
All right. So Ecclesiastes, so this is what you're saying, right? Ecclesiastes is saying, don't shy away from being a little bit wicked. Now, this is very unchristian advice, right? I mean, any pastor you go to with this and be like, hey, pastor, book of Ecclesiastes, or pastor or priest or rabbi or imam, right? You say, any one of these will be shocked, right? You come, hey, the book of Ecclesiastes says it is good for me to sin a little bit. How do you think, is there a way around? Because I mean, what does that mean? If I can sin a little bit, does that mean I can cheat a little bit on the side? Like I'm married and maybe one or two cheating, but for a whole lifetime, I think I deserve one or two, right? Or, I don't steal, but maybe one candy bar occasionally, right? Or I don't smoke, but occasionally I will get a little bit of a smoke, right? So is this what you're saying? Can one sin a little bit on the side and it's going to be okay? Olivera, help us, and then Crystal Dulu.
I don't think you have to actively try. It's already, in these cases, it's already the nature. I think when it happens, don't be so hard on yourself, and then just understand. Because I think before he has said, don't be so hard on yourself. Just keep on your journey. Men sin on the past and men see now. I think he's just describing the nature of what it is. Because nobody's 100% wise after all. So everybody will do some weakness, whether they're trying or not. So might as well work on the wisdom, because the weakness comes naturally.
I like that. I think we can write this one down in the sense that Ecclesiastes here is saying, accept yourself. Right? He's not saying go and sin a little bit. He's saying accept that you will never be completely wise, and accept that you're a little bit wicked, and don't try to be anything else than what you are, right? In other words, don't try to be too wise. This is not you. Likewise, don't try to be too wicked. This too is not you, right? Accept yourself as a combination, as a cocktail of good and evil, and love yourself in a way, right? In your humanity. Accept your humanity and also accept your goodness, right? So accept, in other words, you could say it like this: accept your clay as well as your spirit, right? Both are you. Don't try to be just spirit, right? That's not you. Don't try to be just clay. That's not you either. A human being is a cocktail of clay and spirit, and accept this. And this is interesting because some of us don't accept our clay and we want to be just spirit and perfect. But some of us also don't accept our spirit. We want to be pure clay. Do you see what I'm saying when I'm talking about clay and spirit, right? This is the allusion to the creation story when God takes clay and puts the spirit in it, right? The breath, right? So some people actually also say, I'm just clay. I'm just going to live like an animal, right? I'm not going to cultivate any spiritual tendency because right? He's saying, no, accept. So I love that. I like that as simply him saying, accept yourself. The path to to God is acceptance of our clay and our spirit. And by the way, I know Olivera is right when she says this to a certain degree, because that was the lesson of the book of Job, right? Remember Job? When God basically, when Job finally becomes human, this is when he becomes spiritual. As long as he was trying to be the perfect, right, whatever that he was trying to do in the prologue, he wasn't getting anywhere. It's when Job enters his humanity, his confusion, his rebellion, his emotions, his anger, and really enters his clay, that he has a connection to the realm of the spirit, right? So I think this is very, so Olivera, you're very much in line with the Hebrew thought. Nicely put. Just to conclude with Olivera, beautiful quote by Abraham Heschel, which I'm going to give you right now. Heschel, of course, if you know him, he was a rabbi from New York who actually was a civil rights activist. You can see him marching in Selma right next to Martin Luther King, right? This is and he said something very beautiful. He said, the secret, right, to life is to be both human and holy. Right, so he's saying we need to acknowledge that we are holy, but we are also human, and safeguarding, protecting the balance between our humanity and our holiness is the path to spirituality. So very beautiful. So nice. Okay, all right, Rudolph, let's hear what you have to say about this passage.
Just to add on, the first part of being a moral goody two-shoes can easily lead us onto the path of self-conceit. You can easily, and I know this about myself, when you accomplish things, you can easily develop this excessive sense of your own importance, of your own value. We're naturally prone to overweening and self-infatuation. And if we're only good and we never mess up, well, what is there other than us telling ourselves that we're really important?
Yes, very good, very good. Right, there's a danger in being overly good, as big as being overly bad. We emphasize, oh, don't be overly bad, you're going to go to hell. But, people who are overly good will go to hell too. In fact, they already are in hell, right? So both are problematic. Very nice, I like that. Okay, who else wants to give it a try? Christo Dulu, go ahead.
I guess I need clarity on the distinction between foolishness and wickedness. Because
yeah, sure. Wickedness is okay, I'll give you an example. Wickedness is you kill someone. Foolishness is you yell at someone, you make a mistake, or you make a wrong decision. You buy a house when you don't have enough money to do so, right? Or something like that. So it's not a sin, right? It's a stupid thing you did, right? But wickedness is like you kill someone. So yeah, this is a good question, because he's saying, be a little bit wicked. Or he's not saying that, right? I think, what's her name? Olivera clarified that he's just saying, embrace that you have a little bit of wickedness. Don't hide from it. And that is there. That urge to kill, we all have it, right? Or am I the only one here with the urge to kill? So that's what he's saying. Don't try to hide from your own wickedness, and don't hate it. This is beautiful. I mean, in terms of psychoanalysis, in terms of leading someone out of their trauma, to help someone acknowledge that their wickedness should be loved and embraced and is part of their clay and is part of the cocktail and is lovable, it can be very powerful for us too, right? So I think that's what he's saying. Your wickedness is part of your cocktail, is part of your formula. Don't hate it, right? I like that. Let's see. Rudolph, you have something new to say? Or you just didn't? No. Okay, great. Okay, so I go in that direction. One of the ways I interpreted it was, it is not good to judge to cut between foolishness and wisdom, goodness and wickedness, going back to Genesis, right, where the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is forbidden, right? In other words, it is not for us to judge between good and evil. And maybe the passage can be saying this also, that he's saying, do not decide, you, human being with no intelligence, do not decide. You cannot decide what is good, what is evil, what is foolish, what is wise. You cannot cut between the two. Are you seeing this possible interpretation? Because this leads us to the next step, because it poses a problem, right? But are you all with me on that, right? So this is here an allusion to Genesis 2 or 3, I don't know, where the tree, right? Tree of knowledge of good and evil, it's forbidden to us, right? We are, and even you continue throughout the Gospels, Jesus is saying, do not judge, or you will be judged, right? So there is a kind of, and especially in Ecclesiastes, the idea that who are we to judge? Only God is the judge, right? Who are we to judge between good and evil, between foolishness and wisdom? We don't know. Something we think is evil, wicked, could be good. I'm going to give you some examples of that. I'm going to shock you. Right? Something we judge is foolish could be wise. Again, I'm thinking of the teachings of Jesus or Paul when he says, this teaching is foolishness to the Greeks, right? This is something foolish, which is actually wise, right? When he talks about the teachings of Jesus, he says, this is foolishness to the Greeks and a stumbling block to the Jews, right? So we'll give you some examples, right? But here there might be the notion that we cannot judge between the two. What is foolish could be wise. What seems wise could be foolish. What is wicked could be good. What seems good could be wicked. And I'll give you some examples right now, actually at the end, once I'm done with this whole, my whole argument. But this is the first thing he's saying. Bernard, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, in reference to this, like, there's no one definition of like what's foolish or wicked. Like, something that you think is not hurting anyone, someone could still find a way to be offended by, or like, you know, personally affected by. So it's kind of like, if you try to walk around and not step on anyone's toes, like, you're just going to be sitting there, like, not moving. And especially today, in like the spirit of being woke, like, and everyone trying to be conscious. Everyone is always trying not to step on anyone's toes, and it's like you're doing more harm than good at this point, because we can't even just get out what you want to say, you know?
Yes, we can't even make jokes.
Yeah.
No more jokes. No more. It's finished. We have to be serious. And
exactly.
Very good. Thank you. Nice point. Crystal Dulu, do you want to add?
Yeah, I struggle with this being read as like some sort of like post-truth, like there's nothing good or bad in the world. Like the rest of the Bible goes into great detail about what is good and what you should and shouldn't do. So I don't think that this can be read as do whatever you want. There's no way to know.
All right, very good. You're bringing me to my next point. So I am glad somebody took offense with this. It's offensive. You do not know the good. What do you mean? The whole Bible is telling us what is good and evil. Why is this guy coming saying we don't know, right? Now, first point, in wisdom literature, right, we are, of course, in a context which is subversive, right? And also it's a context where he's realizing, even with the help of the Bible, there are moments we don't know. I'll give you a very clear example. This is typical classic example, right? We know that lying is wrong, correct? Christo Dulu, you agree? And yet, in 1945, in Germany, if the Nazis come to your door and ask you, are you hiding any Jews? And you are you going to lie or not? Right? So there are moments where you look in the Bible just says don't lie. There's no example about the Nazis so even the Bible's as clear-cut as it is, right, or the Quran or whatever, the Gospels, we still struggle at times to know, okay, what is the right course of action here? I'm not seeing clearly. Can you acknowledge that at least, Christo Dulu? Okay, so this brings us, so let me get to the next point so that we can answer you, right? And then I'll get further questions, right? So then we have to look further. So Ecclesiastes, if he's saying that, right, I'm going to say that he is, and then we can see that he actually proposes a third path, right? Another path which is not rule-based. Remember, Ecclesiastes is mother's house, so obviously we can't go and find a nice, easy rule or passage of scripture, right? It's going to be different. So watch what he says next, right? It is good to hold on to one and the other. I can never find my passage, right? And then he says this, so we do not know. So I'm interpreting this as we do not know what is good and evil. And so Christo Dulu is like, what the hell? So then where's the path? How do we find our way? A bunch of you actually asked this question too, right? You're not alone. Watch this. For the one who fears God will escape them all. So escape what? Escape the dilemma, right? Escape this situation where you don't know what to do, right? So here, what he's doing, which this is my interpretation, right? What I think he's doing is saying, sometimes we cannot judge, most of the time we cannot judge, but there is a way to know what to do, but it's not the way you think it is, right? We are taught to know the path, go to the Bible, says this is good, this is evil, this is good, this is evil. And Ecclesiastes is saying, no, sometimes evil is good, sometimes good is evil. And I'll give you examples of this when I'm done with this explanation. And so he's saying, actually, the true path, the ultimate path, the best case scenario path, right, is the fear of God. So I want to stop on that a little bit and understand what he means by the fear of God, because this is a different path than the binary path, right? Everybody with me? Are you seeing what he's doing? Right? He's moving beyond the binary. He's moving beyond good and evil. He's moving beyond the rule-based approach. This is good, this is bad, this is the way, this is not the way, into a different dimension, right? So, all right. So fear of God, we need to understand what it means. Okay, so I have two passages. I have one of the most early, I believe actually it is the earliest passage where fear of God is mentioned. I hope I'm not wrong. But I think as I studied it at the time, I had come to the conclusion. I haven't checked again. So if anyone finds something to the opposite of what I'm saying, I'm intrigued. Genesis 22, verse 12, is one of the first occurrences of the fear of God. So let's turn there so we can understand what is this fear of God. So I'm going to Genesis 22. This is the story of Abraham, verse 12. So let me give you the context, right? You all know the story. Abraham is told one morning by God, you will bring your son, the one you loved, and you will offer him up on the mountain that I will show you. Now, when it comes to good and evil, and even the law of God, is this good or evil, this idea of sacrificing your son? What do you think? Now you're going to start to see. Is God asking Abraham to do a moral thing or an immoral thing?
It's evil.
Yeah. So this is here we are. Whoa, what is God doing? He's going beyond his own law, right? Why? Because he's going to make a point. We're going to see what is this point. So Abraham goes, interestingly. He does this. And by the way, he goes and he's not at peace. You can sense in the way the passage, this passage is very rich. In the way the passage is written, you can sense that Abraham is distraught. He is confused, but he does it anyways. He gets to the mountain, binds up his son, takes the knife, and then he is stopped. And then God says something interesting. So let's look at that. Genesis 22, verse 17. Everybody with me, by the way? Verse 12, sorry. Everybody with me? Genesis 22, verse 12. Put your hand in the screen if you're there. Okay. So he says this. Now I know that you fear God, for you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Okay, so based on this very early passage, one of the earliest definitions of the fear of God, how would you define the fear of God, and how is it different from following moral dichotomies, right? How is the fear of God different from the typical judging between good and evil, or from the binary approach we have to life? Rudolph, and then...
I would say you would want to adjust your judgment to the situation. It's not a choice between good and bad. It is an estimation of what a constant estimation, if you will, of what the results of your actions will be, and thinking past your activity, past your action, and see what it actually will do once you're done with it. What will it do for me, for the world, for the people around me, for the things around me? That fear of God is an instrument to keep you on your toes and constantly evaluate what you do.
So I'm curious though, because I'm looking at the long-term consequences of sacrificing Isaac, and I'm seeing murder. I'm seeing the end of the line that is supposed to, become the kingdom of God, right? So I'm curious how you're coming to that conclusion based on this passage.
Look, this is the most egregious thing to do, to kill someone. So there is value in thinking this through. I don't necessarily prescribe it just to that situation, and I meant it more in a global sense. I don't have an answer for you to say if it would be good to kill someone or to kill your own son, to sacrifice anyone. None of that makes sense to me, period, as it is. So I would say, wait a second, it doesn't make sense. Let me just think what happens here.
But see, this is precisely what Abraham doesn't do. I'm glad you bring this up. This is not a thinking of what is the right thing to do that you're doing right now, right? He doesn't do that. We are not here on the level of the moral deliberation between good and evil. This is something else. And this is what we miss.
Self-conscious thinking, conversation.
Okay, so yeah, you're on the right track. So tell me, go on. Let's see what Christodoulou and whoever else has their hand up. Let's start with Christodoulou. What is happening? What is
this is pure submission. This is right or wrong do not exist. Only the creator of the universe exists. And if he is talking to you directly, which is, something we don't experience, but if he makes a command, that's it. You don't, that's it. He creates ethics. There's no right or wrong when it comes to God.
Okay, very good. Right. So we have here an element of surrender which does not take into consideration the binary, right? Doesn't take into consideration moral deliberation. You are not deliberating. You are following blindly, right? And you're following even though it goes against what you think, what you have been taught is good and evil, right? So so faith is pretty reckless, right? The walk of faith is not for the faint of heart, because you are going somewhere which you do not understand. First of all, where you're going, and number two is going against some of the things you know are wrong, maybe, right? Look at, let me hear a couple more, and then I'll give you another passage even worse. Sorry, Williams, it's been a while. Go ahead, and then,
No, I was going to say, basically the trials that we see are about the fact that, it's not submission. It's more about the fact that it's not even, I feel like when we say submission, we completely take out the fact that you're not submitting. You're basically coming to the point that you say God created you, so you're God's property. And regardless, you have no free will of your own. There is no submission. And I feel like the Christodoulou said it best. There has been no submission. Is no submission. It's just you're just completely devoid of all agency.
Yes, I wouldn't say agency, because you can choose, right? It's a choice to have the fear of God. It's a possibility he's giving you. You don't have to. You can follow the binary all you want, but he's saying the fear of God will help you escape the confusion, right? So you can choose that. But where you are right, I think, is that there is an element in the fear of God where you're not in control anymore, intellectually, right?
It's like when you say, Jesus, take the wheel. And
yeah,
you just be like, whatever happens, happens.
Exactly.
Jesus, take the wheel.
But remember, in the song, she chose to say that, right? Jesus, take the wheel. She's not she's still it's still, right? But you're right. To a certain degree, she was pushed into it, because she just right? If you heard that song, it's a beautiful song, right? Jesus, take the wheel. And it was kind of she gave up, right? So yes, there is an element of giving up, an element of surrender. I don't think the agency is gone, because you do choose that surrender, right? But at that moment when you surrendered, yes, you're right, no agency. Let's see. Go ahead.
Oh no, pretty much the same thing as this idea of surrender, just listening to God. I think that's all I have to say on that point, actually.
Okay, good. So let's go one more passage, Isaiah 50 verse 10. Isaiah is in the prophets. It's after the wisdom literature, so it's after the middle. Isaiah 50 verse 10. He's talking also about the fear of the Lord. Is everybody with me? Isaiah 50 verse 10. Put your hand in the screen if you're there. Okay, those of you who can find Isaiah. Right? Okay, it says this, right? Who among you fears the Lord? Okay, again, this notion of fear. Who obeys the voice of his servant. Okay, so here again, fear connected to obedience, right? So fear is not like a feeling, right? We're seeing that. It's not a feeling. It's not a mental thing. It's an action, right? Continues. Let him who walks in darkness and has no light trust in the name of the Lord and rely on his God. In other words, now we're seeing fear of God as a walking in darkness, right? Watch what he says next. Behold, all you who kindle a fire, who equip yourselves with burning torches, walk by the light of your fire and by the torches that you have kindled. This you have from my hand, you shall lie down in torment. In other words, he's saying, most of us, we want to have light. And so we kindle our own torches. We come up with this is right, this is wrong, this is right, because we want to be in control here, morally, conceptually. And he's saying the fear of God, no torch. You accept to walk in darkness. You are not in control of where this is going. And to a certain degree, it makes no sense. But you can surrender. Why? Because it is the creator. Right? You don't surrender to, I think Perso was angry because she's like, I don't want to surrender to Ecclesiastes, right? Who is he, right? Absolutely, right? But Ecclesiastes this is a surrender to the creator. In as much as the creator is the creator, knows your thing, your makeup, your destiny, your fate, your name, right? So this is very interesting. We are talking here, so notice how we've been talking of letting go throughout the text, right? Surrendering. We surrender our grasp on happiness, right? We surrender our grasp on material well-being. That's what we've been talking about for a while, right? We remember when Ecclesiastes says, I made palaces, I had women, I had this, I acquired it. And then he acknowledges I have to just receive. Now we have shifted on the conceptual level. We also try to control our lives with our brains. And we also try to figure out what is right, what is wrong. And we feel safe in these categories, right? That's why so many of us are fundamentalist Christians or Muslims or Jews. Why? Because fundamentalism is safe. The Bible says, no need to do nothing, just follow the text, right? So what he's saying here is that, no, there are moments in life where what the Bible says is not going to help. And at that moment, you have to walk in darkness. And this is the walk of faith. Now, does everybody understand? And I will give you examples now so you can see very clearly how this plays out. Everybody understands theoretically what I'm saying. Okay, here are some examples of this. This is brilliant. I want you to look at this. So check this out. Okay, this is a really good one in the New Testament. Williams, before I start with my examples, do you want to say something?
Oh, I was going to say, basically, are you saying that it's advocating for more secularity in religion and that sometimes you have to be able to be more secular to view reality instead of just always relying on God for your salvation?
It's slightly different. It's rather than relying on the scripture, you rely on God.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Right? Rather than rely on what the church has established as good and evil or what the state has established as good and evil, sometimes you will life will become so complex that you cannot deliberate. And at that moment, you have to rely on something higher. Actually, anybody can hear any examples of this before I give my examples? Maybe you can find some examples too. Some examples in the biblical text of people who did this or who had to do this. Stories. Anybody have any idea coming to mind? Rudolph?
Well, I've been a soldier in my life. And as a soldier, you have to defend yourself and perhaps hurt others or kill. It certainly is a most egregious thing to do. But if you don't, you are killed. So that's one of these moments when you have to just contemplate what the consequences are and what they mean for you or the rest of the world.
Yeah, and you are now in the moral ambiguity terrain, right? That the Bible doesn't cover, right? If I kill, it's wrong. If I don't kill, it's wrong. What do I do, right? And so this is a typical way. Or in the Nazi era, should I lie? Should I not lie? Should I kill in self-defense? Should I protect my family? Should I protect this family of Jews and kill these two Nazis, who came at my door, right? So life very often is too complex for what the teachings, the traditional teachings of the church or of the mosque or of the synagogue. And at that moment, there has to, so any biblical stories of this, that's what I'm curious. Any biblical story which tells us about this type of faith, apart from Abraham, of course. Oh, go ahead.
I think the first one comes to mind is the woman caught in adultery. Like, I guess during that time period, like, I think you could get stoned for like committing adultery, and like the church that was set in place, like all the Pharisees like were trying to test Jesus and say like, oh, what should we do with this woman? And then like, but Jesus was like defending her in a sense, because like, what's more important than like actually committing the sin, I guess, or like defying the religious like standards and expectations. It was like more so of like having this desire to I don't know, like transcends the right word, or I don't know, but like to be with God, I guess. And like, you know, and this idea of hypocrisy, like if the first one like without sin can throw the first stone at her, and like all these Pharisees realized that like, oh, I'm with fault too, so they started walking away one by one. So like maybe that's an example.
Yeah, you're headed in the right direction, except that Jesus still tells her in the end, don't sin anymore. Right? So he is being very gentle with her, right? Absolutely very respectful, but it's still within the context, right, of this is good, this is evil, right? Although he's much, much more tactful. I'm talking about a blatant transgression, which God, right, is asking of someone, right? Let's see, Brulidakis, let's see if you can help us.
Well, this kind of coming off of Rudolph, but in the time of Moses and Joshua, they had many battles and wars where people were killed. And with the city of Jericho, God tells Joshua to completely, well, he tells them to march around the city, and then God completely decimates the city for them.
So you brought a tricky text, because there's a lot of debate whether the conquest of Canaan was supposed to be that violent. There's a lot of debate whether this was a deviation. And in fact, let me just say a few words about that, because it's a big deal, right? Originally, if you read the text in Exodus, when God first comes, tells Moses about this project, he says, you will not have to fight. I will go before you and chase them out, right? And little by little, it becomes a fight, right? So there is reason to believe that there was a plan A and it became a plan B, right? For several reasons. We can talk about it after class if you want. But originally, actually, the original plan AAA, right, was to be a blessing unto these people. Abraham was living among these Canaanites, which later become decimated by Joshua. And the original goal was to bless them. How did we go from blessing them to genociding them? There is a problem. You see it, you're following my problem, Brulidakis? And we can trace that together if you want and understand why it shifted, but this is a problematic passage. So let's not use that one. Okay, let me help you. So remember, this is a story from the apostle Peter. Right, Peter is. This is after Jesus died and everything, and he's starting to spread the message and so forth. And he has a dream, or maybe a nightmare for him, where he dreams that there is something lowered down, a net of all kinds of unclean animals, disgusting, like snakes and I don't know, a lobster and crabs and all these things that are forbidden to be eaten, right? And in the dream, there's a voice that says, "Eat." Transgression of the laws in Leviticus, right? What's going on? And of course, Peter awakes, sweating probably, right? What is happening? What is going on? Does anybody, you know the story. So those of you who know the story, tell me what is the message and how does it connect to faith? The way we're talking about it here. Who can tell me what's happening? Why would God tell Peter to sin against the law that he wrote, transgress, right? The law that he wrote. Go ahead.
The context of that is, doesn't it have to do with the Jews and the Gentiles, the uncircumcised and the circumcised.
Yeah, right. Go on, explain.
Like, so I guess the old covenant was specifically for the people of God, the Jewish people, but like after the crucifixion of Christ, like there is this revelation that it was not only the promises of God and the covenant he had with Abraham was not only to the Jewish but to the Jews and Gentiles, to everybody.
Exactly. So he's invited to come into close, intimate contact with people who were considered unclean. And there was a whole, there were many laws in the time of Jesus where Jews were not supposed to mingle with Gentiles, because why? To mingle with Gentiles means eating with Gentiles, means eating non-kosherized food, food with blood, animals that are unclean. This is the Levitical law. And so they didn't even begin the contact, because then you cannot get intimate. What's the point, right? So Peter basically is being told, go and get close to these people. Do not be afraid of being contaminated. Break all of the social customs of the time and move this step further, right? So we see here, especially in this passage, faith, right? This is, he doesn't know what is happening. It's going against who he is. He is confused, but he follows in a way in the darkness. And we see later how in a way this becomes the broadening of the covenant to include the Gentiles. But initially, Peter certainly is walking in darkness. This is going against everything he was taught since he was a baby, right? This is his whole moral world has collapsed through this vision. And he's asked now to go beyond his own moral dichotomies to something deeper. Are you seeing in this first example what faith looks like? Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Okay, here's the second example. I love this one. Joseph, the father of Jesus, of course, he's engaged with his mom, right, Mary, and she turns up pregnant. So obviously he doesn't have the revelation from the Holy Ghost that this is from God. So he's like, yo, what? So he's proceeding by law. He should divorce her because this is illegitimate. This is not his son. She has sinned, and this is not acceptable, right? So he wants to divorce her, and then he gets a dream. You need to marry her, nevertheless, right? I've heard this beautiful interpretation that the real Christmas miracle is how Joseph overcame this hurdle and married Mary, even though for him, there was no angel telling him the Holy Spirit made her conceive. For him, she cheated, and he still marries her, right? This is the true Christmas. So now Joseph, imagine, he's marrying this woman who he feels doesn't love him and has cheated on him. Do you think he sees clearly at the moment what's happening? Do you think he's serene? I don't think so. I think Joseph was walking blindly, stumbling, like Abraham about to sacrifice Isaac. Joseph, I mean, imagine yourself in that situation. You're engaged. That woman sleeps with someone else. Carrie gets pregnant, and now you have to marry her. Nobody wants to do this, right? And so he certainly, we don't talk about this, about Joseph, how much he probably had to overcome and how much he had to walk in darkness before things started to become clear, although they never really did, right? Mary is dumbfounded until the end of her life when it comes to Jesus, right? So that's another example, right, of sometimes, right, the walk of faith takes us beyond clearly our moral dichotomies, what we have been taught, everything we knew, our comfort zone, our moral comfort zone, right? We are taken beyond. And then, of course, if you want to look, of course, in the Hebrew Bible, right, you have this crazy story of Esther. Esther, who is, of course, kidnapped as a child and ends up in the harem of the king. And her uncle is kind of supporting this, right? So here she is now, she's become the queen, right? And again, right, imagine Esther, how she must have walked in darkness throughout this time until the moment where it is revealed why she was put in that position. So this is again, right, I hope you're seeing how the walk of faith, if we're really serious about faith, right, this is a walk that will take you certainly beyond, for sure, right? When you surrender materially, it's a risk, right? Because now you're exposing yourself to life and whatever life brings to you. But this is now surrendering conceptually, meaning you don't know anymore where you are and what you believe, and yet you feel, what's the word? Convicted to walk in that direction, even though it is in darkness. Anytime you're walking in darkness, right, is the walk of faith. So this is kind of interesting, right? There is, in a way, another way of living than being between the binary, right? There is the walk of faith in the sense that you listen to the guidance of God, and you know that sometimes it will take you beyond the binary. The binary is not really, it's a good crutch, but ultimately you want to walk without crutches, directly led by the Spirit, right? Are you seeing what I'm seeing a little bit here in this passage? Let's have a little bit of a discussion about that, because I'm sure there's some unclarity. Go ahead.
There's this really good movie actually that it's called The Silence. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but it's like a bunch of priests that go into like Japan as missionaries, and like their whole life is just based on like just preaching the gospel and living like a Christian life, but like by doing so they're hurting the Japanese like Christians on the island, and like because of their pride and like their desire to hold on to their faith, many of the Japanese Christians are getting killed by them, like, oh, if you don't denounce your faith, we're going to kill these Japanese Christians. And like at the very end of the movie, like he's either told to simply just step on like a stone of Jesus and like denounce his faith in that sense, and like, you know, he finally lets go of his pride and steps on it. And like at that moment, that's when Jesus kind of like speaks to him, and like he gets this revelation of like, this is what faith is. It's not like this idea of what's good and right, what you think is good and right, but like this idea of humility and like kind of stepping out of into the darkness, I guess. And I thought it was really profound, and like
Oh my
it was
God,
really,
thank
like,
you.
a good expression.
This is perfect. The assignment of everyone is to watch Silence tonight. I started to watch it, but it looked really violent, so I chickened out, but I will watch it now. So he actually denounces his faith? Is that what you're saying in the movie?
Yeah, at the very end. Oh, it's a spoiler.
Oh, okay, don't tell us. We'll watch it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Kind of really spoiled it, but
no, it's good. No, now I'm gonna watch it. I wasn't gonna watch it, so that helped. So beautiful. Yes, I think you guys are kind of seizing what I'm trying to say. I don't know if I was completely clear, but I think you got it at least. Olivera, go ahead.
I have a question. So, on the examples that we saw, like that we heard, like from the Bible, quite often the God is directly speaking with people, you know. So right now, how does we discern that? Because like I try as much as I can not to eat meat, but sometimes I smell meat and I'm pretty sure it's not God telling me go and eat that meat. It's my own desires. Yes. So how do you discern from what comes, what's like you know, or what's like your own weakness or your own I don't know, anxiety or something else?
Yeah, that is such a good question. And this is, I've struggled with that question for so long. And here's how I have personally resolved it for myself. You have to ask yourself, what is the loving thing to do, right? Which is, I think, what those guys in the movie did. See, we get so caught up in good and evil that we forget about love and hatred, right? So, and sometimes we will sacrifice another human being for the sake of truth. This is typical, classic, right? So for me, what I usually do in a situation is ask myself, what is a loving thing to do? And you have to think hard whether it is loving, how loving, whether it's loving for you or loving for the other, right? It's kind of hard to purify this. But in general, if you're following the voice of love, yes, we would have seen, if we did the Song of Songs, we would see that the way that she transgresses everything for the sake of love, right? So that's how I do it. But other people will tell you that the voice of God is something you have to fine tune your hearing to hear. So over the years, as you're communicating, I'm not there yet, right? So I can't really say much about that, but I have heard people say, you have to ask, right? Ask the question and then hear the response in whatever you stumble on in life. So it could be a conversation or a book or maybe a strong insight. So there are many people out there who are saying you can actually hear the voice of God, right? But it comes with time and knowing God, right? And getting us and experiencing the presence of God so you can feel that this is coming from God and not you. So this is still something that I am working on. So I cannot yet give you any. Me right now, I'm just asking myself, what is the loving thing to do? And that's how I'm navigating. So I don't know if I answered your question, hopefully partially. How are you feeling, Olivera?
But I think that misses the weakness, because sometimes you gotta be the weakness that he told about, or like the foolish. So I don't think the answer is always love. I think if you always go for love, sometimes you miss the mark. But I don't know.
Not love as a feeling, right? Like for example, right? You're dating someone and you're dating, let's do a classic one. You're dating a married person, right? You love them.
Oh my God.
Right? So you love them. So your love is telling you, I have to be with this, but not this type of love, not love as a feeling, right? Love, there's two kinds of love in the Greek, which I like the distinction. There's erotic love, right? Which is the feeling. And there's agape love, which is love in a way, thinking of the well-being of the other person, not of your the other person. So when you're thinking in terms of what is the best thing I can do, and sometimes the best thing you can do is stop the relationship, sometimes the best thing you can do is continue. So in that sense, I think it's pretty reliable what to do if you're thinking carefully what is the best thing to do for that person. But this is not so much what Ecclesiastes, although it could be. Love will sometimes take you beyond moral dichotomies, right? But I think here it's really about hearing the voice of God. We're seeing this in these stories. Peter has a vision, Abraham has actual conversation. So I do think it's possible from these texts, right? And I think it's something that we should be thinking about and maybe even seeking, right? People tell me it's possible. I believe them.
I believe you. I don't know how.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, I mean, maybe someone in the class can illuminate us. I'm totally open to Bernard. Help us.
The way I kind of do it is I just ask myself why, like when I'm going about my regular day, like in life existing, like I've just taught myself to ask why when I do a lot of things, because we don't take the moment, like even just when I am craving something or seeing someone and I'm just like, why is this happening right now? And I don't know if that's just my psychologist side, but I'm just like, I just like to turn before I react to someone in anger or something, like just whatever. I just literally am like, okay, am I mad at them? Or did this just remind me of something else? Like, okay, that's something I need to work on. Or like listening to your gut more. Like there are things like sometimes a thought will come out of nowhere and you don't realize why, but you start to feel something all of a sudden very strongly. And it's, as like you were saying, Professor, like knowing yourself is a lifelong journey, and I think you start to hear the voice as you get to know yourself better and you can discern things, but it's always going to be a struggle, you know?
Yeah, and the key, I think, is to go beyond the moral deliberation. So very often we want to figure it out. And so here we are thinking and grinding, right? Here we're talking about going beyond that. So your mind, so you who is doing some Eastern thought, Olivera, you would relate to this very well, because you have to calm the mind before it arises in you, right? I think this is one of the ways that you can, because you're already on that path, right, can try to practice that, because he's talking clearly about going beyond your own moral deliberations. So in Eastern thought, we have a number of techniques to silence those, so that a third voice comes up, right? So I think, Olivera, perhaps going in that direction might be helpful. I don't know. Okay, Rudolph, tell us, help us.
You used to, it'll be $20. Look, you used a term called if it arises in you, and having moral deliberation. I believe, and I've experienced it many times, that if you have that overwhelming feeling of facing something undefined, that you need to have the courage to take yourself out of the situation and stop trying to solve it yourself. it is just happening. You have no influence over it. And rather than trying to influence it, become a bystander and look at it and say, these things are happening. What good can I pull out of this situation? And, you know, if it helps you, Larice, if you're looking for answers, they were just giving to you by having the ability to talk to 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, 16 people here on this screen. Make use of it. Ask.
Nice. Yes. I love the way you say to become a bystander, right? I really think he's talking about a path beyond your own obsessive activity, which is
limitations.
Sorry?
Limitations.
Yes, because we saw that before in the existential grasping of life, right? We try to grasp our happiness. Here, this is a different grasping. We try to grasp our own truth, and we try to grasp what is the right thing to do and figure it out by ourselves. Here, he is saying there is a different path we have to adopt, which he calls faith or fear of the Lord, right? But which I think exists in all traditions, which has to do with going beyond your own limited thinking into a higher sphere of consciousness where you can hear perhaps a deeper truth, right? So in Hinduism, they do this, right? In Eastern thought, they really have brought this to a science, right? How to calm the thought so that this deeper voice can arise, right? So I think maybe Ecclesiastes would be intrigued. Here he talks more about the Hebrew way, which is God directly. I mean, we know that God talked to him directly in a dream, right? So he would be talking more about receiving a vision or some conviction. We're not there in our civilization. Nobody getting dreams and visions. I mean, maybe a few people, but most of us. So we have, but this, he's just giving us an orientation. There is a different way to do this. And we kind of have to stumble along and try to find this, this path, right? Which he calls the path of the fear of God. Good. Okay, I think we're all like dripping with exhaustion. So let's take a quick break, maybe like till 5:10, like 4 minutes, just to go to the bathroom, whatever. And then we'll come back for chapter 11. So I'm gonna stop the recording.